in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
Good day. Wow. Excuse me. Good day. There we go, everybody. It's the 28th of May 2016. I am your host, Walter. Coming to you from the Netherlands, where it's 4 p.m. That makes it 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States. Welcome, everybody. If you go to ucy.tv, you can find the chat link there. A couple of people have already arrived. Good morning, everybody. Captain Gringo, Hopper, Frog, Joe, Miss Donna, howdy. Joe, hey buddy, Juana Taco, and surely you just is already in there for 1 day and 14 minutes. And Vince, hey buddy, and one unknown. So, how you doing, everybody? We've had like a sunny day here. Cup of tea I have, so let's see here. Light up this ciggy. Hey. So today we should be continuing with Joseph Plummer, Tragedy and Hope. We are at chapter 7. But before that, I want to bring your attention to Peace Revolution. It's a podcast series. If you Google that, you will get there. And it's episode number 92. This one has just come out. It's a new one. It's 18 hours long, and it's filled with more information. If you scroll down, you get to a whole list of links as to where they get their information from. So that's 18 hours. I usually do these in days. It's way too long to listen to at once. Alright, so check it out. Peace Revolution, episode 92. Alright. Let's see if some people have joined, I think. No. I guess not. Anyway, if you want to see a dashboard, I would call it, or whatever, where you can have access to all kinds of media, like Prepper Podcast, but also Russia Today and RLM news shows. Check out reallibertymedia.com. At number 6 is ucy.tv. There you go. Ta-da! So, there we go. La-ba-la-ba-la. Hey Dal, what's up, buddy? There's also this. I thought about it. I think 3 weeks ago also that I am subscribed to this CFR video thingy that they bring out, and there was another one, and this time they titled it the way a book's name, and I'll paste the book in the chat room. And they started talking about things. Let's see, is that right? Yes. That's the PDF. War by other means, geoeconomics and statecraft. And in the video that CFR had put out with the same title, the man in there says that geoeconomics has been a term around for a while, and that it has been used by many, he says, without a definition given for the word. And so he says that in this book, he and his co-writer, which is a woman, have actually a definition for the word geoeconomics, and I'm probably not going to be able to repeat literally what he said, but he said that it was the use of economic tools to influence geopolitics. That's basically the gist of it. It's the use of economic tools to influence geopolitics. So, there you go. Let's see. I think that was it. No, actually not. The Juana Taco has given me a link which I should share with everybody. This is, I don't know what year this is, 2009, yeah. But since we're talking about Tragedy and Hope 101, this is very appropriate. Clinton and Quigley in the New World Order from theendron.com, I guess. And also, this is probably a topic for a series of shows. There have probably been radio hosts that have made whole series of shows on this. It's the Tavistock Institute. And that's a link from educateyourself.org. And that is theendron.com, Clinton quickly, and the New World Order. You can read more quickly from the Anglo-American establishment, for instance. Okay, so those were the things that were shareable, so to speak. At the top of the hour, if I keep my eye on the time, we will do some Freedom Palooza, where Pokerface makes the music. All right. So, we were at chapter 7 at reference number 5. From 1921 onward, the Milner Group and the British government did all they could to lighten the reparation burden on Germany and to prevent France from using force to collect reparations. Remember, France had only survived German aggression during World War I because Britain, the United States, Russia and Italy had come to her aid. As the network's secret policy to remilitarize Germany began taking shape, the French became progressively more alarmed. Right? So, remember what I said last week, that if you see in those times, right, if you see your neighboring country building an army and you don't react to that, you shouldn't be surprised to be run over in a blitzkrieg, right? So again here, France is the French became progressively more alarmed, right? That's what it says here. Well, what do? You're gonna cry like a baby, or you're gonna set up a defense? What kind of nonsense is this, right? Quigley writes that France sought in vain one alternative after another to guarantee its security and to keep Germany down. Well, what do you mean, sought one alternative after another? After World War I. Why were they so afraid of Germany after World War I? Is it because there's something that's left, even in 1970, 1980? This little thing could be, if you start pulling it like a little thread, may lead to a reason. It's that the Germans in the Netherlands were known to be gründlich. Huh? It's a German word. It means thorough, more or less. Right? Because German tools, they were sought after. Right? They were the best tools. The Germans didn't make crap. Right? And so, is it that there's more reasons? Right? The German people in 1920s were high-standing people. Lots of new discoveries came from there, right? They were industrious people. And so is that why they were afraid of them? That Germany might, stand back up like the giant that it is and, crush France? Is that it? That's crying like a baby, isn't it? That's saying, well, you're being very good and you're being very industrious and me, I can't do it. I can't defend myself. I don't know exactly what's going on there, right? But just my ramblings on. Because it's really strange, right? This whole history, it's like the more pieces of information I get, the more strange it seems, right? Like the Windsor family. It is said that they changed their name, that they were actually Germans. And I think it will probably even be noted on Wikipedia. Right, so that's all German. And think of, what's his boy's name in his Nazi uniform? Prince whatever. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that say Europe is exactly what Hitler wanted. Yeah. Yeah. We have now a European Council, which is exactly like what it used to be in the USSR. This is basically a communist bloc. So to be honest with you, you might hear some rumors about Europe going to war with Russia. I doubt that very much. I doubt that very much. Hoopla. All right, where were we? So Quigley writes that France wanted to keep Germany down, but all of these efforts were blocked by machinations of the Milner Group. When, at the behest of the network, Britain blocked the Geneva Protocol of 1924, this finally sparked outrage around the world. True to form, the network simply turned to the outrage into its own advantage. Alright, so what's the Geneva Protocol of 1924? Copy that. Paste it in the Google. Let's see what we get. The Geneva Protocol for the Pacific Settlement of International Disputes was a proposal to the League of Nations presented by British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald and his French counterpart, Edouard Herriot. It set up compulsory arbitration of disputes and created a method to determine the aggression in international conflicts. All legal disputes between nations would be submitted to the World Court. Did that already exist? It called for a disarmament conference in 1925. Any government that refused to comply in a dispute would be named an aggressor. Any victim of aggression was to receive immediate assistance from League members. British conservatives condemned the proposal for fear that it would lead to conflict with the United States, which also opposed the proposal, and so it was shelved. The protocol envisioned wide-ranging regulations to bring about general disarmament, effective international security, and the compulsory arbitration of disputes. In the Geneva Protocol, the member states would declare themselves ready to consent to important limitations of their sovereignty in favor of the League of Nations. After preliminary approval on 2 October 1924 by all the 47 member states of the League of Nations and the Fifth General Assembly, however, it was not ratified by Great Britain the following year under the newly elected government of Stanley Baldwin, with Austen Chamberlain as Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. The protocol subsequently failed to materialize. Right, so blah, blah. Let's see, click back to the pages. There was an outburst of public sentiment against the selfish and cold-blooded action. As a result of this feeling, which was widespread throughout the world, the group, that's with a capital G, determined to give the world the appearance of a guarantee to France. This was done in the Locarno Pacts. In reality, the agreements gave France nothing, while they gave Britain a veto over French fulfillment of her alliances. If Germany moved east against Czechoslovakia or Poland, and if France attacked Germany's western frontier in support of Czechoslovakia or Poland, as her alliances bound her to do, Great Britain, Belgium and Italy might be bound by the Locarno Pacts to come to aid of Germany. 7 is the Anglo-American establishment, page 264. This, of course, wasn't the last time the network betrayed world opinion and public trust in pursuit of its disastrous European agenda. Quigley uses the term dual policy to describe additional deceptions that were employed in the run-up to World War II. Dual policy can be summarized as pretending to honor the will of the people publicly while continuing to pursue antithetical policies behind the scenes. These deliberate deceptions not only empowered men like Adolf Hitler in Germany, they also empowered the fascist regimes of Benito Mussolini in Italy and Francisco Franco in Spain. According to Quigley, one of the most astonishing examples of British dual policy in the appeasement period occurred when Britain allowed Mussolini to conquer and seize Ethiopia. At the time, the British public was still operating under the assumption that the League of Nations was created to protect the sovereignty of weaker nations. As such, a poll of 11.5 million British citizens found that more than 11 million felt Ethiopia should be protected from Italian aggression under the League. 10 million supported economic sanctions against Italy, and more than 6.5 million supported military sanctions if necessary. Hold on, guys. Prior to this poll, the ruling party in Britain had expressed its indifference regarding the fate of Ethiopia. After the poll, it changed its tune completely. All of a sudden, collective security and the League of Nations were of the utmost importance in British foreign policy, and new candidates were trotted out to ride the wave of public support for collective security. The Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary were replaced to make people believe that the past program of appeasement would be reversed, and quickly provides an example of how the new Foreign Secretary, Samuel Hoare, fulfilled his part in the deception. In September, Hoare made a vigorous speech at Geneva in which he pledged Britain's support of collective security to stop the Italian aggression against Ethiopia. The public did not know that he had stopped off in Paris en route to Geneva to arrange a secret deal by which Italy would be given 2/3 of Ethiopia. While publicly supporting collective security and sanction against Italian aggression, the government privately negotiated to destroy the League and to yield Ethiopia to Italy. They were completely successful in this secret policy. In the process, they gave the League of Nations, the collectively security system, and the political stability of Central Europe their death wounds. The consequences of the Ethiopian fiasco were of the greatest importance. Mussolini was much strengthened in Italy, and as a result of the deceptive collective security election promises, the Conservative Party in England was entrenched in office for a decade, during which it carried out its policy of appeasement and waged the resulting war. Quickly doesn't say much about how Mussolini was initially helped into his position of power. A passing comment on page 242 of Tragedy and Hope simply states that Mussolini received funding from the Entente governments during World War I, and this funding eventually paved the way for his unprincipled career, which ultimately made him dictator of Italy. However, Quigley does spend a good amount of time describing the rise of General Francisco Franco in Spain. Francisco Franco. If you'd like to read a short section of Tragedy and Hope that covers pretty much every filthy aspect of political power, widespread corruption, gross negligence, secret deals, exploitation of the population, horrendous military waste that benefits a select few, assassinations, overthrowing representative governments, etc., then read pages 586 to 604. In those pages, Quigley covers everything from the Spanish-American War of 1898 to the Franco dictatorship that took over Spain in 1939. This is far from uplifting. It's definitely an interesting section of the book. Here we only need to cover the Franco Revolution and his rise to power. On this topic, Quigley first discusses an agreement between Mussolini and conspirators seeking to overthrow the Spanish government. He states that Mussolini promised arms, money and diplomatic support to the revolutionary movement and gave the conspirators a first installment payment of 1.5 million pesetas, 10,000 rifles, 10,000 grenades, and 200 machine guns. So, by this point, the consequence of Britain's appeasement of Mussolini have begun to spill over. By appeasing the fascist regime of Mussolini, Mussolini gained the freedom to empower another fascist regime in neighboring Spain. Neighboring Spain? You mean like in the neighborhood? Because these two countries do not share a border? When the Spanish government discovered that General Francisco Franco was conspiring to seize control of the country, it attempted to derail the plot by transferring him to the Canary Islands. But this was little more than a temporary setback. A well-known editor in England was able to retrieve Franco from exile, fly him to Morocco, and even supply another 50 machine guns and 500,000 rounds of ammunition for the coup. After arriving in Morocco, Franco requested and received some assistance from Hitler as well. And by early August 1936, the fascist revolution was well underway. But the Spanish government proved very resilient. Despite assistance from Italy, Germany and even Portugal, Franco's initial coup was only partially successful. The German Secretary of Foreign Affairs noted as much near the end of August when he wrote, "It is not to be expected that the Franco government can hold out for long without large-scale support from outside." It appeared as if the Spanish government would soon defeat Franco and the rebels, but that was before Britain and France entered the equation with the so-called non-intervention agreement. As written, the non-intervention agreement should have helped the Spanish government because it prohibited Italy, Germany and Portugal from providing any more assistance to Franco and the rebels. Also, the agreement made it seem like Britain was trying to honor the will of its citizens. By about 8-1, the British public supported the Spanish government and opposed the rebels seeking to overthrow it. The reality, of course, was quite different. Quigley writes that Britain was neither fair nor neutral in the way that it enforced the non-intervention agreement, and that Britain engaged in large-scale violations of international law, to the benefit of Franco and the rebels, during the course of the Spanish Civil War. He adds, "The non-intervention agreement, as practiced, was neither an aid to peace nor an example of neutrality, but was clearly enforced in such a way as to give aid to the rebels and place all possible obstacles in the way of the Spanish government suppressing the rebellion." This attitude of the British government could not be admitted publicly, and every effort was made to picture the actions of the non-intervention committee as one of even-handed neutrality. In fact, the activities of this committee were used to throw dust in the eyes of the world, and especially in the eyes of the British public. Britain's attitude was so devious that it can hardly be untangled, although the results are clear enough. The chief result was that in Spain a left government friendly to France was replaced by a right government unfriendly to France and deeply obligated to Italy and Germany. When the war ended, much of Spain was wrecked. At least 450,000 Spaniards had been killed, and an unpopular military dictatorship had been imposed on Spain as a result of the actions of non-Spanish forces. Franco went on to become the longest ruling dictator in European history. During his reign, he murdered tens of thousands of his political opponents, violently oppressed dissenting voices, and repealed civil liberties. In power from 1939 until his death in 1975, Franco's funeral was attended not only by fellow network-supported dictators, but also by such network royalty as U.S. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. Next heading is Adolf Hitler. Although a great deal has been written about Adolf Hitler, you'll rarely find any mention of the network or its role in the rise of Nazi Germany. The unspeakable human suffering of World War II can hardly be imagined, let alone captured with words, and so there will be no attempt to do so here. Rather, I'll simply provide a few final details about the tactics and policies enacted by a handful of men that made the Nazi regime and World War II a reality. After successfully facilitating the remilitarization of Germany, the network continued moving forward with its plan. That plan included the liquidation of Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. However, to assure success, another obstacle to German power had to be removed. France had to be ejected from the western German Rhineland so that German troops could reoccupy the area. On this, Quigley writes, "It would be too complicated a story to narrate here the methods by which France was persuaded to yield. It is enough to point out that France was persuaded to withdraw her troops from the Rhineland in 1930 rather than 1935 as a result of what she believed to be concessions made to her." 19 it says Anglo-American Establishment, page 266. Here Quigley explains the importance of maintaining a demilitarized Rhineland. Once Germany fortified this area in violation of the Treaty of Versailles, it could move east into the countries marked for liquidation, with less fear of a French attack on Germany's western border. The Rhineland and the zone 50 kilometers wide were to be permanently demilitarized, and any violation of this could be regarded as a hostile act by the signers of the treaty. This meant that any German troops or fortifications were excluded from this area forever. This was the most important clause of the Treaty of Versailles. So long as it remained in effect, the economic backbone of Germany's ability to wage warfare was exposed to a quick French military thrust from the west, and Germany could not threaten France or move eastward again against Czechoslovakia or Poland if France objected. The French undoubtedly understood the strategic danger of a German-occupied Rhineland when they left the area, but they falsely believed that the Locarno Pacts would prevent Germany from moving troops back in. According to Quigley, this was just another one of the network's deceptions. The Locarno Pacts were intentionally drawn up with the loopholes that would allow Britain to escape the necessity of fulfilling her guarantee. Quigley adds, as a matter of fact, when Hitler did violate the Locarno agreements by remilitarizing the Rhineland in March of 1936, the Milner Group and their friends did not even try to evade their obligation by slipping through a loophole. They simply dishonored their agreement. With Hitler's Germany successfully returned to the Rhineland and with the stage set for his conquest of Austria, Czechoslovakia and Poland, the network began dealing with the final obstacle that stood in its way: public opinion. Clearly, the British government couldn't admit its decision to feed 3 sovereign nations to the Nazis, so to keep public outcry to a minimum, it began manipulating and terrorizing citizens into accepting Hitler's actions. The chief task of the Milner Group was to see that this devouring process was done no faster than public opinion in Britain could accept, and also to soften up the prospective victims so that they would not resist the process and thus precipitate a war. The British government created fear by steadily exaggerating Germany's armed might and belittling their own, by calculated indiscretions, like the statement that there were no real anti-aircraft defenses in London, by constant hammering at the danger of an overwhelming air attack without warning, by building ostentatious and quite useless air raid trenches in the streets and parks of London, and by insisting through daily warnings that everyone must be fitted with a gas mask immediately, although the danger of a gas attack was nil. In this way the government put London into a panic. As noted, this tactic of inciting panic, which was gradually built up from 1935 through 1939, was also used on the prospective victims of Nazi aggression. Britain applied intense political pressure on the countries that were expected to yield their sovereignty to Hitler, placing special emphasis on the exaggerated account of Germany's military strength and blunt declarations that the victims would be on their own if they chose to resist Hitler's plans. They were led to believe that resistance was futile. They were assured that Britain would not intervene on their behalf. Following this formula, Austria was the first country to fall without a fight. After its annexation, those who had opposed the Nazis were murdered or enslaved. The Jews were plundered and abused, and extravagant honors were paid to the Nazi gangsters who had been disturbing Austria for years. Apparently, all of this was okay with the network, because it immediately began working on the next target, Czechoslovakia. Within 2 weeks of Hitler's annexation of Austria, Britain was moving. It was decided to put pressure on the Czechs to make concessions to the Germans. All this was justified by the argument that Czechoslovakia, in a war with Germany, would be smashed immediately. On pages 625 through 639 of Tragedy and Hope, you'll discover the truly disgraceful step-by-step process that ultimately destroyed Czechoslovakia. Using a combination of merciless secret pressure, threats and deception, the network eventually wore down its opposition and achieves its goal. Though the story is too long to adequately summarize here, suffice to say one of the most democratic, prosperous and best administered post-World War I nations also fell to the Nazis without a fight, and the predictable consequences followed soon after. The anti-Nazi refugees were rounded up by Prague government and handed over to the Germans to be destroyed. Germany was supreme in Central Europe, and any possibility of curtailing that power either by a joint policy of the Western powers with the Soviet Union and Italy or by finding any openly anti-German resistance in Central Europe itself was ended. Since this is exactly what Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, and his friends had wanted, they should have been satisfied. Hold on, guys. Da-da-da. Satisfied or not, the issue of liquidating Poland remained on the list of things to do, and this is where the network's ability to manipulate public opinion began to lose ground. Following Hitler's final annexation of Czechoslovakia and the Memel region of Lithuania, citizens turned downright hostile toward any continued appeasement of the Nazis. Hitler's actions had opened their eyes to the fact that appeasement was merely a kind of slow suicide, and quite incapable of satisfying the appetites of aggressors who were insatiable. This final realization might have been an epiphany for the average citizen, but Hitler's real ambitions were quite clear to most men in government long before his brazen action in Czechoslovakia, and they were made clear to the rest during the crisis. Nevertheless, appeasement and concessions to Hitler continued, only now they continued in secrecy. There is no mystery to how this tragic story ends. Hitler became progressively more belligerent and impatient, insisting on his right to use force to acquire his desires. According to Quigley, this is the only reason the network finally turned on him. It seems they had no problem with Hitler murdering and ruthlessly oppressing people. He had done that from day one of his 1933 German coup. What do you mean, German coup? That's contradictory to the information that Hitler was voted into power. There was no coup. He won the elections. Their main issue, assuming Quigley is correct, was that he refused to be more diplomatic in the way he gained control of the sovereign nations that he intended to oppress. In the shadow of the League of Nations and world opinion, overt Nazi violations of national sovereignty put increasing pressure on the network's Western puppets. When Hitler violently attacked Poland in 1939, this finally forced the network's hand. Thus began a 6-year-long tide of aggression and cold-blooded savagery on a scale that had never been seen before. Civilian deaths far exceeded those of combatants, and many of both were killed without any military justification whatsoever. Yeah. I don't know if you're listening, Grim. We were discussing the word ignorant last time. And since we're now coming across the word combatants, those are combat ants. Like you have servant, serve, and, right? And the same goes for ignorant. That's an ignore ant. Yeah. For instance, in the 1939 Battle of Poland, 3.9 million Polish civilians were executed or murdered in the ghetto. As far as the total number of civilians killed during the war, in all nations combined, that number has been continually revised upward since the initial release of Tragedy and Hope. According to Wikipedia, civilians killed totaled from 38 to 55 million, including 13 to 20 million from war-related disease and famine. Total military death from 22 to 25 million, including deaths in captivity of about 5 million prisoners of war. Accepting the two lowest estimates above, we arrive at 60 million dead. To put that enormous number in perspective, 60 million people taken from the United States would have wiped out nearly half of the 1940 US population. This horrific body count is made even more disturbing when you realize that those most responsible for orchestrating World War II likely walked away with 0 casualties. And once again, the same network that nurtured and facilitated an unspeakable global disaster profited handsomely. Not just financially via the billions earned and mountains of debt added to government balance sheets, but more so politically. That is, where the network failed to secure US participation in its League of Nations scheme following World War I. It succeeded in securing US participation in its second global government scheme, the United Nations, following World War II. This essentially destroyed the problem of American isolationism. With that out of the way, the United States has done the heavy lifting in the network's sovereignty destruction project ever since. Alright, brings us to the next heading. From global government to global governance. Quigley claims that the network's first global government scheme, the League of Nations, was never really meant to be used as an instrument of collective security or impede sovereignty in any meaningful way. I'd be remiss if I didn't address this foolish assertion. Though Quigley bases his claim on the statement of men within the network, he again fails to weigh their propensity for deception. Reading between the lines, a much more believable argument emerges. Here I'll briefly summarize that argument. If the United States had agreed to join the League of Nations after World War I, the network would have gladly begun using the military might, financial resources, and good name of the United States in pursuit of its global objectives. Obligations under the League's collective security agreement would have been invoked when convenient and ignored when inconvenient. Contrary to Quigley's claim, it isn't that a league of coercion wasn't desired by the network, it's that such a league required US participation to work. In support of this assertion, consider the following. 1. Alright. Blah blah blah. Juana Taco brings us a link because I was, mentioning that Hitler was elected into power, but that the PDF that we're reading talks about a coup in 1933, Nazi coup. She or he Googled it. 1933 coup plot and Prescott Bush. Blah, blah. I don't know if it's related either, Juana, but we will see. According to Charles Higgins's American Swastika, where I first read about this material, there were not one but two attempted coups against FDR in 1930. The best known of the two was the 1933 business plot, whose originators asked Marine Corps General Smedley Butler, a Republican, to function as their frontman. Unfortunately for their plans, Butler was a genuine patriot who decided to spill the beans to the McCormick-Dickstein Committee in Congress. Let's see, this is not about Hitler, is it? Nope, don't think so. So yeah, there do seem to be links between the Bush family and Nazi Germany, where it was Prescott Bush, right? Was using one of the companies to support Hitler. And then it was noticed, and well, you can't do that. It's traitorous. But it never got the attention that it needed in the courts. One, the majority of the network's statements opposing collective security came after it was clear that the United States would not join the League and, therefore, would not participate in enforcement. This is when the network began seriously undermining the League. This is when it decided to embark on its policy of so-called appeasement. In other words, the network could not demand that the British protect the sovereignty of nations that it had already decided to allow Hitler, Mussolini, and Spanish rebels to violate. To do so would only turn British power against the network's own aims. 2. The network was present every step of the way during the drafting of the League of Nations. It was present every step of the way for the worldwide propaganda campaign in support of the League of Nations. It had every opportunity to speak out against objectionable language or obligations under collective security. But again, meaningful opposition didn't come until after the United States refused to join. Why? Well, one quote states that the failure to secure the United States participation presented a very serious problem for the British Empire because, by joining the League without the United States, Britain had undertaken great obligations that it now had to, in honesty and self-regard, revise. Another quote states that once the United States rejected the League, the keystone was taken out of the whole arch of any league of coercion. And it goes on 3 and 4, but it's the top of the hour, so we're gonna do some music. Where's the music? Here it is. We'll be right back, guys. Enjoy Pokerface. Check them out at pokerface.com.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Who? Huh?
Dos más.
Drink them if you got them.
Smoke them if you got them.
I'll need a lubricate for this.
Hey, baby.
How's this one start? I'm ready.
Sounds like he's in tune.
Well, that's how I sing. You would want the guitar to complement that.
The song's off our last disc. It's called It's Not What You Say. Thank you. Last song we'd like to survive. We got Mad Eye, Front to Enemy, and Art Larson to wrap up the night for day 3 of Freedom Palooza. So stick around and we're going to get the fire going again. Last night for camping out. Thank you so much. God bless us for the 3 days of beautiful sun. A little bit too oppressive, but thank you for the daylight.
Pokerface. Check them out at pokerface.com. So, this is the second hour of the Solvinur event. Welcome everybody. This is UCY.tv. Del has joined us. Welcome. Donna is back. Hey there. Dan has joined us. Hopper, Frog, Joe, Captain Gringo, Juana Taco, Matty Clues, Tomato, what's up, buddy? And one unknown. And Vince has just rejoined. Welcome, buddy. So, let's see. My tea. Okay. Put this there. Okay. So, let's continue where we left off. We were at 3. There are some specific network statements against the League serving as world government, but even these are hedged with qualifiers like it could be a world government if given the power to tax citizens and if represented those citizens instead of representing states. The irony of this sentiment coming from men who set out to destroy fascist regimes is hard to miss. Another quote simply states that the Milner Group sought to prevent influential people from using the League as an instrument of world government before popular opinion was ready for a world government. Donna. One. I think I'm at 1. Quigley himself admits that certain phrases or implications were introduced, which could be taken to indicate that the League might have been intended to be used as a real instrument of collective security, that it might have involved some minute limitation of sovereignty, that sanctions might under certain circumstances be used to protect the peace. He even references a quote that explicitly states interference with national sovereignty, including international coercion, would be necessary if a nation refused to cooperate with the League during its 90-day dispute period. Oh, Mater. Well, that's Dutch indeed. Yeah. It's yeah. It's a distance, right? Metric, I think you call it metric distance. It's about 3 yards. It's a little more than 3 yards. 1 meter. In Dutch we say meter. It's also tied to the word measure. Because you can hear the etymological ties, right? Meter, measure. When you, for instance, in Dutch, you can mate the temperature. MEET, right? So it's also to do with measure. Yep. It sounds very Dutch, Donna. Even your front name sounds Dutch. Yeah. All right. Enough of that. Where were we? But now, admittedly, this is a moot point. The League of Nations was replaced by the post-World War II United Nations. And this is absolutely, and there is absolutely no question regarding how the UN and its related agencies, like the IMF and the World Bank, have been used to violate national sovereignty. Ah, that's why, Donna. Okay. But even this fact is now fading in relevance because the network is seeking to replace the United Nations with something even more powerful. It is, quoting from the 2008 CFR program entitled International Institutions and Global Governance, World Order of the 21st Century. Yeah. We've discussed this before, right? Global governance. The Council on Foreign Relations has launched a comprehensive 5-year program on international institutions and global governance. The purpose of this cross-cutting initiative is to explore the institutional requirements for world order in the 21st century. The undertaking recognizes that the architecture of global governance, largely reflecting the world as it existed in 1945, has not kept pace with fundamental changes in the international system. A 12-page summary of the project states that the program draws on the resources of the CFR's David Rockefeller Study Program, and its purpose is to offer recommendations to U.S. policymakers about how to improve the performance of global governance mechanics. In order for the United States to assume its proper role in the emerging world order, it targets certain issues that must be dealt with. Issues like United States adherence to constitutional traditions, sovereign prerogatives, and the separation of powers, which gives Congress a critical voice in the ratification of treaties and endorsement of global institutions. All serve to complicate the United States' ability to assume its new international obligations. Yes, you read that correctly. The Constitution, separation of powers, Congress' voice in the ratification of treaties, and, of course, sovereignty itself, are all listed as problems that must be overcome. For those versed in the cynical ways of the network, the pretext offered for circumventing constitutional limitations in favor of embracing network-directed global governance will surely make the blood boil. Here are just a few. Managing the global economy, a pretext for further consolidation and control of the world's monetary system. 2. The recently rebranded climate change, a pretext for funding the network's global government and for centralizing control over the one thing no nation can survive without: energy. 3. Preventing and responding to violent conflict. Violent conflict is often caused by the network itself and then used as a pretext for intervention and interference with national sovereignty. However, the pretext that jumps out the most, the one that actually mocks the reader's intelligence, is the struggle against Al-Qaeda and affiliated organizations. The network has funded, trained, and armed terrorists in pursuit of its global objectives for decades. This fact can be easily verified by researching any number of historical events, whether it's Operation Ajax in 1953, Operation Cyclone in 1979. Yeah, that's... I'm still looking for that one. I did try to find credible links for Operation Cyclone. I just can't find it. Or Bosnia and Kosovo in the 1990s. Or Libya and Syria in 2011 and 2013. Yeah. Respectively, in each case the terrorists found aid and comfort by turning to the West. Brandon Tuberville. Truth on the Tracks. Check him out. He's at ucy.tv. He knows a lot about this stuff that we just mentioned. None of this is mentioned, of course, in the CFR white paper. However, it does admit that the rise of transnational terrorist organizations has forced the United States and its allies to tolerate some sacrifice of national sovereignty and reconcile distinct constitutional and legal traditions. Rather convenient. In the final chapter, we'll delve deeper into network-sponsored acts of terrorism, which are often referred to as false flag operations. Keep in mind, although these acts are directed by Western government institutions, the vast majority of the military, political leadership, and civilian population is never told the truth about what their government is doing. Which brings us to chapter 8. Hold on, guys. Need to adjust this browser. Yay! Chapter 8: False and Designing Men. In the previous chapter, we touched on one of the more obvious ways that leaders can manipulate the public. They can choose to implement a dual policy, that is, a policy of publicly pretending to honor the will of the people while simultaneously doing everything possible to evade it. By any reasonable measure, dual policies constitute an egregious betrayal of democratic principles and public trust. Yeah. Alright, so this is just me banging again, of course. But if that's a problem, right? If it's betrayal of democratic principles, if that is the problem, then we're on the wrong road, guys. Because that is not the problem at all. Well, of course, I'm not exactly sure about what his definition of democratic principles is, but I don't like it. It's it sounds like most votes go, right? That's the idea, I think. So that means that 52% of the people get to decide the fates of the rest of the 48. It's insane, right? So you shouldn't hold these so-called democratic principles. These democratic principles are, in fact, an antithesis to principle of non-aggression. All right, enough about that. They also revealed the deeply dishonest nature of the ruling class. Yeah. However, dual policies are not the most effective of the most immoral way to manipulate the public. For that, we must turn to false flag operation. The term false flag usually describes a deadly or immoral act that is planned and carried out by one group, but is made to appear as if it was planned and carried out by another. Adolf Hitler's Operation Himmler provided a good example. It consisted of a series of false flag operations, each designed to create the appearance of Polish aggression against Germany. One way the Nazis achieved this was by taking prisoners from concentration camps, dressing them in German uniforms, and then killing them on the Polish frontier. These dead Germans were later used by Hitler as a justification for attacking Poland in 1939. Alright, so I don't know exactly how much is true about this, because this fact that the Germans invaded Poland for this reason was not in my history lesson. They never even gave a reason. Other than Hitler was nuts and he wanted a united Europe. So, which false flags are commonly used as a pretext for war? They can also be used by leaders to justify silencing dissent, suspending civil liberties, and seizing additional power. Again, we can turn to Adolf Hitler for an example. Prior to the German election of March 5, 1933, see, that's what I said, right? So I don't know what's up with this little bit of text earlier that was talking about the German coup, but there you go, right? Prior to the German election of March 5, 1933, the Nazi Party had done all it could to weaken and disrupt opposing political parties. But despite their best efforts, it appeared as if the Nazis would still face stiff competition at the polls. Here Quigley describes how they dealt with the problem. Under circumstances which are still mysterious, A plot was worked out to burn the Reichstag building and blame the communists. Yeah. Alright, so I'll tell you the Dutch version of this. An unfortunate Van der Lubbe. Yes, that was his name. Right, so that's probably how it's spelled. I'll type it in the chat. If I spelled it wrong, then blame me. But you can just, if you Google that, you should come to the Dutch story here. This is that this guy was mentally insane. His name was Van der Lubbe, and he was supposed to have created this fire at the Reichstag. Right, so it doesn't seem logical to tie communism to an insane guy, right? He was mentally disturbed. That's at least what they say, right? See, where were we? After the building was set on fire, the government at once arrested 4 communists, including the party leader in the Reichstag. Oh, I didn't know that. The day following the fire, Hindenburg, the president of Germany, signed a decree suspending all civil liberties and giving the government power to invade any personal privacy, including the right to search private homes or confiscate property. At once, all communist members of the Reichstag, as well as dozens of others, were arrested. The true story of the Reichstag fire was kept secret only with difficulty. Several persons who knew the truth were murdered in March and April to prevent their circulation of the true story. Most of the Nazis who were in on the plot were murdered by Göring during the blood purge of June 30, 1934. Both Operation Himmler and the plot to burn the Reichstag provide straightforward examples of false flag operations, but other variations do exist. For instance, sometimes the act of aggression and subsequent casualties are completely fabricated. If you recall from Chapter 6, Operation Northwoods offered this type of false flag as one potential option. The proposal involved an elaborate scheme using a remote-controlled drone aircraft and take cockpit transmissions to make it appear as if Cuba had shot down a US civilian airliner filled with students on vacation. After being widely reported in the media, this non-event could then have been used as a pretext for going to war with Cuba. Northwoods also proposed other common false flag variations, like provoking the enemy and then allowing them to successfully attack, known as a stand-down false flag, and also creating an enemy in the form of a terrorist group, and then using the subsequent terror attacks as a pretext for going to war. Although Operation Northwoods was endorsed by the highest-ranking officer in the United States Armed Forces, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lyman Lemnitzer, and although it went all the way to the President Kennedy's desk for final approval, some insist that it was just a one-time aberration that had no chance of ever going operational. Those who make this claim are not serious students of network-directed policy. Nonetheless, it's worth looking at the primary argument they offer in defense of their position. which is that Lemnitzer allegedly lost his job for signing off on the plan. I would suspect that you or I would face something a little more severe than unemployment if we were conspired to facilitate terror attacks against US targets. It is true that Lemnitzer, after signing off on Northwoods, was denied another term as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but he wasn't jobless for very long. Rather, he was soon appointed Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And NATO is the organization that, along with the CIA, created and ran Operation Gladio. In other words, Lemnitzer's new post provided him the perfect lawless environment to operate in, where orchestrating violent government coups, engaging in false flag terrorism, and carrying out assassinations all served to further official network policy. He wasn't punished, he was promoted. Which brings us to the next heading. Which is Operation Gladio. You had to attack civilians, the people, women, children, innocent people, unknown people, far removed from any political game. The reason was quite simple: to force these people to turn to the state to ask for greater security. This is the political logic that lies behind all the massacres and the bombings which remain unpunished, because the state cannot convict itself or declare itself responsible for what happened. Vincenzo Vinciguerra, Gladio-linked terrorist. Says 3 and 3 says, Daniel Gonzer, NATO's Secret Armies, page 7. If Operation Gladio had been conceived and directed by the Nazis, most people would have no problem believing every despicable detail. Why? Because most people accept that the Nazis were psychotic criminals who engaged in countless violations of human rights, and that they had no respect for freedom or, quote-unquote, democracy. Learning of additional crimes wouldn't disrupt the average person's worldview at all, far from it. Confirmation bias would kick in. 4. Confirmation bias. 4. Confirmation bias refers to people's propensity to accept information that supports what they already believe, especially if their belief is deeply entrenched and emotionally charged. Confirmation bias would kick in, and the individual would experience the psychological rewards of having their worldview confirmed. But what happens when, instead of the Nazis, it's the United States government that is accused of countless violations of human rights? What happens when the presumed guardian of freedom and democracy is accused of using terrorism and murder to circumvent both? Now, confirmation bias begins working in reverse. The individual's deeply held beliefs about Americans' morality are challenged. There are no psychological rewards for even considering the charges, let alone accepting them. Faced with this threat to their worldview, many will immediately reject the accusations as ridiculous. They will angrily defend the good name of America and shower the accuser in hatred and condemnation. The network knows this. Countless university studies, along with secret operations like MKUltra, have provided their experts an understanding of human psychology that exceeds anything we can comfortably imagine. They are masters at manipulating the well-meaning public away from scrutinizing their crimes. But there is a key to understanding this particular manipulation. Its success relies almost entirely on how the accusation is framed. In this case, the more sweeping the accusation, the better it is for the network. In other words, it actually is ridiculous to accuse the United States government of facilitating terror attacks when 99.9% of the government's employees had no idea what was going on and had no say in the matter. It is ridiculous to accuse America of supporting ruthless dictators and working to destroy freedom around the world when none of the American public was ever asked its opinion on the policy. Though stated in earlier chapters, this point deserves further clarification before we continue. The average government employee, the average American citizen, and the nation as a whole has nothing to do with operations like Gladio. These operations are created and run by the network, and the network is composed of criminals in the truest sense of the word. These criminals do not respect America or the American form of government. Quite the contrary, they despise it. If permitted to do so, they will destroy the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights, because the ideals enshrined in these documents are nothing more than a limitation on their power. They do not represent the United States or its people. 5. I'm not suggesting that we are all blameless, as it is our job to police and control the actions of our government. What I am saying is that we must make sure that blame for the network's crimes is placed precisely where it belongs. Otherwise, the network can steer an emotional response among the public by appealing to patriotism that serves its own interest. Continuing. Unfortunately, it makes no difference whether or not the people agree with the network's policies at this point. Under the current system, public opinion is skillfully manipulated and outright ignored. This is the heart of our problem, and it leads us to a troubling question from Daniel Ganser's book on Operation Gladio. If democracy is a system of rules and procedures which define the parameters within which political action can take place, what happens when alongside this system there is another system whose rules are mysterious, its procedures unknown, its powers immense, and which is able to protect itself against the formal institutions of democracy by a wall of secrecy? That's a pretty easy question to answer. The hidden system is where the real power resides. The visible system is only there to maintain the illusion of legitimate government and conceal the hand of those who've taken hold. So let's reveal that hand now. The CIA created Gladio in operation with British intelligence MI6 under the pretext of containing the communist threat. Even this seemingly valid pretext was a deception, because the network had been instrumental in creating and sustaining the communist threat all along. Right. With even deadlier consequences than the Hitler Empowerment Project. Gladio's network of secret armies engaged in unorthodox warfare under NATO command. They operated not only in all 16 NATO countries during the Cold War, but also within the neutral countries of Sweden, Finland, Austria, and Switzerland. The existence of these armies was kept hidden from all but a handful of government personnel within each country. Gunzer writes, "The secret armies were equipped by the CIA and the MI6 with machine guns, explosives, munitions, and high-tech communication equipment. Leading officers in the secret network trained together with excuse me, let me light my cigarette here. So, right, leading officers of the network, of the secret network, trained together with US Green Berets and the British SAS Special Forces, the secret armies, as the secondary sources now availably suggest, were involved in a whole series of terrorist operations and human rights violations that they wrongly blamed on the communists in order to discredit the left at the polls. The operations always aimed at spreading maximum fear among the population and ranged from bomb massacres in trains and market squares in Italy, the use of systematic torture of opponents of the regime, Turkey, the support for right-wing coup d'etat, Greece and Turkey, to the smashing of opposition groups, Portugal and Spain. And that's from NATO's Secret Armies, page 74 and 75. Though these secret armies were allegedly created to protect the Western European democracies from Soviet invasion, they were instead used to interfere with the democratic process whenever the electorate threatened to vote contrary to the network's desires. This dual policy, claiming to protect national sovereignty and democracy while simultaneously working to undermine it, was apparently outlined in secret NATO documents dating back to 1949. The document stated that before a nation could join NATO, it had to agree to remain aligned with the West regardless of what the electorate of the nation wanted. Another top-secret document from NATO went further. If the citizens within a nation became so fed up with their puppet NATO leadership that they rose up against it, the US military would come in and suppress the uprising, even if that meant acting without the consent of the national government itself. 11. Again, NATO's Secret Armies, page 185. There are many very disturbing things about Operation Gladio, but perhaps the most disturbing is that the CIA and NATO managed to keep it secret for so long. Despite a long list of murders and atrocities committed by the armies and by ruthless regimes that the army supported, both the operation and its architects remained hidden for more than 40 years. It wasn't until 1990 that the first on-the-record government disclosure was made, and not because of a desire to come clean, but because former denials could no longer stand. If not for the effort of an inquisitive Italian judge named Felice Casson, Gladio might never have been exposed. Which brings us to the next heading. Which is called Uncovering Gladio. In 1984, Judge Felice Casson began digging into an unsolved crime, a car bomb attack that took place near Petiano, Italy, 1972. Though the attack killed 3 police officers and seriously wounded another, the Italian government never managed to find and prosecute the terrorist involved. While conducting his research, Casson discovered a series of suspicious blunders and fabrications that had derailed the original investigation. One of those fabrications included a deliberately falsified report about the type of explosive used in the attack. This specific piece of evidence not only led Casson to the man who had planted the bomb, it also led him to the reason why the terrorist had escaped punishment for more than a decade. Judge Casson discovered that the report, which at the time claimed that the explosive used in Petiano had been the one traditionally used by the communist Red Brigades, was a forgery. Marco Morin, an expert for explosives of the Italian police, had deliberately provided fake expertise. He was a member of the Italian right-wing organization Ordine Nuovo, that's New Order. And within the Cold War context contributed his part to what he thought was a legitimate way of combating the influence of the Italian communists. Judge Casson was able to prove that the explosive used in Petiano, contrary to Morin's expertise, was C4, the most powerful explosive available at the time, used also by NATO. 13, and that's again from NATO's Secret Armies, page 3. Casson's investigation revealed that Ordine Nouveau had collaborated very closely with the Italian military secret service. Together they had engineered the Petiano terror and then wrongly blamed the communist Red Brigades. Judge Casson identified Ordine Nouveau member Vincenzo Vinciguerra as the man who had planted the Petiano bomb. He confessed and testified that he had been covered by an entire network of sympathizers in Italy and abroad who had ensured that after the attack he could escape. A whole mechanism came into action, Vinciguerra recalled. The Italian military police, the Minister of the Interior, the Customs Service and the military and civilian intelligence services accepted the ideological reasoning behind the attack. Out of Casson's investigation and the successful prosecution of Vinciguerra that followed, the Gladio's secret finally began to unravel. Unpunished attacks that although that's possible of course, unpunished attacks that had terrorized Italian citizens through the 1970s and 1980s were now examined in a new light. The Piazza Fontana massacre of 1969, the 1974 Italicus Express attack, the 1980 Bologna railway bomb that killed 85 and maimed 200, all of these serve to further the aims outlined by Vincent Vinciguerra during his sworn testimony in 1984. Keep in mind, Vinci Guerra provided this testimony 6 years before the Italian government admitted that the secret armies existed. He described Gladio, including its link to the Italian Secret Service and NATO, in unequivocal terms. Alright, so Gladio is the Italian name, as far as I know. For a Belgian version, a Dutch version, you would have to use different names. They are known, as far as I know, on the internet. I found the Dutch one, but I didn't feel like writing a Freedom of Information request or anything, So these Operation Gladio, they have a different name in every country. In equivocal terms, continuing, with the massacre of Pitiano and with all those that have followed, the knowledge should by now be clear that there existed a real-life structure, occult and hidden, with the capacity of giving a strategic direction to the outrages ... lies within the state itself ... There exists in Italy a secret police, a secret force, parallel to the armed forces, composed of civilians and military men, in an anti-Soviet capacity. A secret organization, a super-organization with a network of communications, arms and explosives, and men trained to use them. A super-organization which took up the task on NATO's behalf of preventing a slip to the left in the political balance of the country. And that's available at Wikipedia if you Google Vincenzo Vinci Guerra. In another statement, Vinci Guerra stated, "The terrorist line was followed by camouflaged people belonging to security apparatus, or those linked to the state apparatus through report or collaboration. I say that every single outrage that followed from 1969 fitted into a single organization matrix. Avanguardia Nacional, like Ordino Nuevo, were being mobilized into battle as a part of an anti-communist strategy." And half of the sentence is blocked out here, guys. I can't read that properly. Picking it up at institutions of power, but from within the state itself, and specifically from within the ambit of the state's relations within the NATO, the Atlantic Alliance. Although Vinci Guerra wasn't the first person to expose Gladio, excuse me, guys, hold on. Although Vinci Guerra wasn't the first person to expose Gladio under oath, the former head of the Italian Secret Service had resentfully confessed 10 years earlier, his testimony and the Casson's further research is what finally broke the story. It forced the Italian Prime Minister to retract his earlier denials and publicly admitted the existence of Gladio to the amazement of citizens and parliamentarians alike. This watershed moment not only exposed the network's secret armies in Italy, but it led to the discovery of secret armies in 19 other countries as well. From the torture and terror in Francisco Franco's Spain, where a former defense minister admitted, "Here Gladio was the government," to the assassination and false flag carried out in Turkey, from the indiscriminate mass shootings of men, women and children in Belgium, to the imposition of a military dictatorship in Greece. The network ruthlessly violated the sovereignty of nations while claiming to defend freedom, human rights and democracy. For insight into the level of hypocrisy, consider this snapshot of what occurred in Greece immediately following the Gladio coup. In the space of some 5 hours, 10,000 people were arrested by military squads according to the detailed files and planning, and were taken to reception centers. Most of those who were arrested in the first hours after the coup were later moved to police and army cells. Communists, socialists, artists, academics, journalists, students, politically active women, priests, including their families were tortured. Their toe and fingernails were torn out, their feet were beaten with sticks until the skin came off, and bones were broken. Filthy rags, often soaked in urine and sometimes excrement, were pushed down their throats. "We're all Democrats here," the chief of the secret police in Athens was fond of stressing. "Everybody who comes here talks. You're not spoiling our record." The sadist torturer made it clear to his victims. "We are the government, you are nothing. The whole world is in two parts, the Russians and the Americans. We are the Americans. Be grateful we've only tortured you a little. In Russia they'd kill you." Alright guys, 58. This is UCY.tv. This has been the Solvinur event. I want to thank everybody in the chat room. Baconator 1000, what's up buddy, welcome back. Captain Gringo and Dell and then Defiant, then Cooper, Hopper, Lone Frog, Joe, hey buddy, Juana, hi, Murbly, hello there, hey Otto, also welcome back, Tomato, hi, what's up, and Vince, and one and on. Thanks a lot for listening everybody. Next week we should probably continue this. There's I think more than 2 hours to go still, so take care and have a good time. See you later.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of